an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Fleabag, Season 2, Episode 4. In this episode, something happens in a confessional booth, which is a location near and dear to my heart for reasons I shall explain. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Karyn for commissioning this episode. Hey, Karyn. So Karyn commissioned a live watch of this episode. And I'm always really interested in live watches because sometimes there's disagreement between fans and listeners on what should constitute a live watchable episode. And sometimes I've had a live watch where I'm not entirely sure why this was the one. Occasionally that'll happen where I'm it was interesting, but I feel like maybe I didn't give them the reaction they wanted. And this is one where it's a very obvious why. It's very obvious why. Okay. So I'm going to tell you guys something. Years ago, probably at this point 8 years ago, I self-published a book of erotic short stories on Amazon called Bite-Sized Erotica. It was me sort of just turning my hand at writing in general. The whole thing with self-publishing is that there are a million hoops that you have to jump through to format your shit in the first place. And I figured erotica is a good staple that people are always willing to buy. A lot of the time it doesn't even have to be that good. And I was just you know what, I'll just try that. And one of the stories that I wrote was about a woman who is in love with a priest. And she finally confesses her feelings for him in the confessional booth. And the things get a little bit out of hand. And it was always personally one of my favorites. I am very into the whole taboo thing a lot of the time. Just the whole idea of oh, we really shouldn't. This is fucked up. Low key is my jam exactly. So I have just been a fan. And I have ever since the intro of Hot Priest, I was oh my God, this works really well for that. And then they actually did it, but they didn't quite do it, which is better? Is it better? I feel like it's a little bit better, you guys. There is something about Unrequited that is so much more, and that's not to say that I don't want them to fuck it all, but having this incredibly hot moment. Look, a lot of other stuff happens this episode. I totally will get to it. I swear. But we all know why we're here, right? Let's just be honest. So, I just got to talk about how the whole thing goes. She comes to church to pray. She isn't even actually looking for him. He says something really cocky at one point about how oh, were you here looking for me? And it's of course understandable why he would think that. But actually, she's genuinely here because she's feeling lost. And this is sort of what can happen is if you don't have a particular faith, but you're feeling adrift, you start to reach out to whatever's closest and hold on to it, thinking maybe this will do something. And that's obviously what's going on here. So Ryan, oh, this eye is working. Thank you, Ryan. I have some makeup on because I'm going to have a date with Owen tonight. So, and this like moment of almost her reaching out to like a higher power for guidance is interrupted by rap music. I don't know this song. But, and I will say too, the episode is like the beginning of it when they're like, you know, this is rated such and such. It is mentioned for like drug use. And I sort of wondered if the priest was going to have been like stoned on something because he's acting a little bit wild here. But it appears not, or else we just don't know about it yet. Regardless, he is trying to like jump up to get at a bottle of liquor that he's like sort of placed out of his own reach, I guess. In this wonderful moment where he says, "God help me," as he's trying to reach it, it just falls into his hands. I just really love how the show has decided that they're going to like lean into God is always watching. And that's sort of what winds up putting the kibosh on their little moment. But she says something like, "Hello, Father." And he says, "Oh, listen to you saying Father like it doesn't turn you on just to say it." Which is so annoying because he's of course correct. And you can't help but be a little bit salty when someone has got you nailed so completely. And I don't mean in the good way. I mean, they are aware the effect they have on you. They are aware exactly what your like weak points are. And they're willing to just say it because they're so confident that they've got you in the palm of their hand that they don't even like worry they're going to put you off. Which there's something very attractive about that. And it could also backfire really easily. But with him, of course, it does not backfire. Now, last episode, I talked about how I totally understand her finding him so attractive. I understand everybody else finding him attractive. But I said that he doesn't really do it for me personally. And I stand by that in a way. However, there is some, and guys, help me out. What is the actor who plays the priest's name? What is his name again? I always just think of him as Moriarty. He has this quality to him. I saw a preview for a show the other day. It was a preview for something from the BBC, I think. And he plays this like, basically like playboy who sets up shop in like the British countryside in some manor and has like Dada-esque shows and does this like bizarre dance to introduce himself. And it was a similar thing. Andrew Scott, thank you, Karyn. It was a similar thing to this scene in a moment where the presence that he has is what's so attractive. Like, a photo of him, you just be like, yeah. And this is what's, I think, always true of the actual hottest men, is that just a photo of them doesn't really do anything. You have to see them in action. You have to see the way they move. You have to see the expressions they get on their face. And then it all of a sudden clicks together and you're like, oh my God. You are stunning. I can't take my eyes off you. Help, somebody grab me out of this. And this is such a great example of this for me. So, first of all, he convinces her to get into the confessional with him. Because he's tried earlier on to get her to talk to him about her pasts and things that are important to her. And he can't really get anything out of her, which is not a surprise. Like, that's her whole thing, is that she is very withdrawn and doesn't want to share her or be vulnerable. So he's choosing a different tact here. I don't think that when they started with this, that he intended it to go anywhere like where it winds up going. I really don't think that's what he meant to happen here at all. But they get into the booth together, and there is something so hot about not being able to like see each other well. In this, it's more that she can't see him at all. There's different types of booths, I'm assuming, because I've never been in one, just full disclosure. But there are movies and TV shows I've seen where you can see a silhouette. You can just generally tell that there's someone there. In this one, it doesn't feel like there's any indication. She can hear him over there, and that's about all she gets. So when he pops up in front of her later, it's a genuine surprise because she couldn't even tell if he was still there or not. So he asks about her sins, and she makes a sort of joking response about some things she's done, slowly getting a little bit more serious, but still not really getting into the thing with Boo. I assume that her sister is the only one who actually knows, based on the fact that she threw it in her fucking face at the end of the last season. But she tells him finally, when they really get to the question, which is, what do you want? She tells him that what she wants is someone to tell her what to do. And that she understands why people are drawn to him and to this faith. Because that's what it is. It amounts to someone telling you, here's how you get to heaven, do this. And it's very comforting. And this has always been something for me that while I find it really frustrating because I don't personally buy into any particular religion and I don't really understand people clinging to it the way they do, I also understand this as an appeal because this was part of the deal with my father. My father grew up in a very poor household with 14 brothers and sisters. As soon as he was old enough to fight and hold a gun, he left and joined the guerrilla army because it was some place that would feed and clothe him and give him a sort of family. And when he decided that it was time to move on from that, it didn't surprise me. When I heard about this, that the religion that drew him in was a fundamentalist Christian religion because there is something sort of militant about it. There is a strictness, an absolute quality that if you are into being told how to live your life, which he clearly was, despite being a control freak, it sort of stemmed from him wanting someone to take that away from him, which I think in some ways might have been due to the fact that he didn't feel like there was a real authority in his life growing up. His mother was harried by, like I said, over a dozen children, and his father was a drunk who was almost never there. So I think that sometimes people are looking for an influence that feels paternalistic because they don't feel like they got guidance or had anyone really looking out for them when they were kids. That's just one theory. Or that they did have somebody looking out for them that way, and that's very comforting. And so they want to remain in a system that sort of fosters that same feeling of being watched over and instructed. And being obedient was comforting. I am not like that. And so I find it really frustrating to watch happen when it feels like people are being taken advantage of. But I do understand the appeal. And that's what she says here. She's talking about every aspect of her life and how she wishes that somebody would just take it off of her hands. And this is such a real phenomenon. I think in general, a lot of us just get exhausted by the bare minimum of the ins and outs of living as adults. It's a lot. It's a lot. And people don't warn you because there's no way that you can comprehend the warning. So what's the point of even saying, hey, by the way, life's going to be really hard for you coming up. Just be ready for that. There's going to be shit that you genuinely don't know what to do. And then there are going to be things that it's I will only pick up and open the TikTok app because somebody makes me and tells me, and I can't avoid it any longer. So, and this is something that I've found really fascinating regarding like trying to make better choices in your daily life. There is something that's called decision fatigue. And it's part of why prepping is important if you want to make good choices towards the end of your day. Because if a lot of folks have this particular struggle where they wake up and they start off on the right foot. They get their exercise done, or they make a really healthful breakfast. They're feeling good about themselves. They're pretty productive. But as the day goes on, it begins to fall apart. And by the end of the day, that's when they start binging or maybe drinking, doing whatever thing it is they've been trying to avoid all day. And it's a documented phenomenon that the human mind can only take so many decisions per day. And then we just get exhausted. And we reach a point where whatever is easiest is what's getting done. Whatever's like the simplest without the thing that requires the least thought on our part is the thing that's going to happen. So that's where she's arrived generally in life. She has decision fatigue regarding her whole life. And she's saying this to him. And all I could think as I was watching it was, so you want to be a sub? Because, like, that can be arranged. Like, there are people out there that will absolutely take that on for you, girl, if that is what you are looking for. The problem is if you are like me, you kind of want that, and then you immediately rebel against it, which is called being a bratty sub, which is what I am. I'm sure that's a shock. I kind of think she would be too. But that's a whole other conversation. So, this is when there's this long silence. And he tells her to kneel. And he just says it. And she says, "What?" And he says it again. And I think I came. I'm pretty sure I came. I am 90% sure that just him saying kneel caused an orgasm. I'm pretty certain. You can tell with her, it hasn't reached that point because she's just in it, and she's still sort of confused. If she were watching this from the outside, she would have had the same reaction as me. But she's too, like, emotional. And so when he says it, she's just kind of like, okay. And there's not really that sort of response to it. And she kneels. It takes a minute. And there's this silence. And you can see her sort of relaxing into it. Like she's, okay, he told me to kneel. I guess he means that we're going to pray. And let me, like, sort of try and let go and let that happen. And just as she sort of does that, the curtain gets whipped aside, and he is staring down at her. The look that he gives her, that's what I'm talking about. When I say, it's not about how he looks. It's about how he looks. Do you get what I'm saying? He looks at her like simultaneously he is a starving man and she is a full course meal, and like he is almost like completely separate from this event. There is this wild, it's a little scary. That's what's hot. Is that he's a little bit like, oh God, is he about to like yell at her? What is he going to do? Yes. Yell at me, Daddy. Father, I'm sorry. All he could have done is open that fucking curtain and stared at me. And I don't think I could have done another thing. I don't think if he kissed me, I think I would have broken. I just don't think that there'd be any remaining functionality to my body after he looked at me like that. It's too much. It's too much. And this is what I was talking about with that preview of that other show. He does the same thing. He gives the camera this very solid, unblinking look. And it's unblinking, but it's not like his eyes are overly wide so as to be creepy. It's unblinking with this solidity of confidence that is rock solid. Like, he has no doubt whatsoever what your response is going to be. And he's actually not that concerned about your response because it's not about that. He's doing what he's going to do, and you're simply here for it. And you know what? I am here for it. I am so here for it. I want to rewatch this one scene over and over again until I die. That's how I feel about this. I'm so glad that you guys made this a live watch because I was ready to hit the fucking ceiling. Honestly. So, he gives her that look and steps toward her, and I was like, what is he going to do? 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 I couldn't tell. I really couldn't, because I was like, I feel like they're psyching me up so that I think they're going to fuck, and then that's not what's going to happen. I think that they're trying to fuck with me right now. And like, that kind of is, but it isn't. I thought it was going to be like he was trying to project this desire toward her that he didn't intend to fulfill. And then he puts his hands on the sides of her face. And you guys, I can't. Who is responsible for this scene? I want to know. So, we've got Phoebe, who is the writer of the show. I'm going to give her 85% of the credit. That said, was it written exactly this way? Because I really feel like Andrew Scott is this guy actually, like, in life. I think he can reach for this sort of persona really easily because this is actually him. And I would not be surprised at all if this had been written in a slightly different way. And he was like, here's what I'm going to bring to it. I think I should do this. And she was like, okay. Yes, I agree. Do that. That's like my headcanon, because it's certainly lovely to be able to write a scene and get a super hot guy to have to act out the scene that you're in with him because it's his job to do it. But I really love the idea of, like, she wrote the outline and he did something else with it. And she just kind of, So Karyn says, okay, but he is a gay man. How? Doesn't matter. That energy doesn't... It doesn't matter who it's directed toward. It just does, like, and there's like, I just think that's really him. I think that's really him. I don't think that's acting. I don't feel like I have seen this kind of scene played before. And it doesn't have that sort of resonance, man. I just don't think that was acting. I think that he reached for a part of him that is alive and well and really there. And it just worked really fucking well for this moment. That's what I think. So, he puts his hands on either side of her face. And he leans in. And he kisses her really, really softly, and there's almost a sense of, like, is he gonna kiss her? Like, you can see her wanting to kiss him, but she's not sure if he's gonna, and she doesn't want to do it and spook him and get him to, like, And finally, they are all over each other. And I was watching this, guys, I was so sure Pam was going to walk in. Because, like, she lives in this building, doesn't she? Because he lives in the back of the building, and she, like, shares the space with him, if I'm not mistaken. And also, I've just had this vibe from her this whole time that she's in love with him. So I sort of expected that she would be dogging his steps, and I was waiting for her to walk in and catch the two of them, because they aren't in the confessional booth. My story took place entirely within the booth, because obviously you don't want to be out in the sanctuary. Fucking come on. But these two, I guess it's so late at night that they just don't expect anybody to, you know. But I was getting really fucking agitated, you guys. I really thought they were going to get caught. I was freaking out. Also, at one point I screamed, "Is this real?" Because I had a sudden fear that none of this was actually happening. That this was all Fleabag's fantasy. And then we were going to, like, smash cut back to her crying in the booth. And it was just going to all have been something that, like, she wished happened. And they are, there is no doubt about it, intending to fuck. Because she is unbuckling his pants and complaining about how he's got trousers and a frock on over it. And he's apologizing. And it's just obviously everybody here knows what's about to happen. There's no lack of clarity. And then a painting falls off the wall. God said, "Enough of that, you two. Hey. And smacked a fucking painting off the wall. Yeah, you two. Come on, stop it. I see you. No, look, I get it. It's super fucking hot. It really is. Because it's wrong. So don't. Just don't. Go home and jerk off. Nope. Turn around." And that's what he does, is he looks at her, looks at the painting, looks at her, and there's a moment of her obviously wanting him to be like, "Yeah, I want to fuck anyway." But he can't. He can't do it. He really believes every time something like this happens that is God stepping in and being like, "Hey, listen to me." It's hard to suddenly turn off your belief in that. And there's a part of him, I'm sure, that welcomes this to a degree. You know, I think there was a voice in his head that had just gotten really, really faint, saying, "This, you don't want to do this. This is not a good idea." And this sort of brought him back to reality. Because how would this end? That's the real question, you guys. What happens if they have sex? Does he continue to be a priest and they just meet up in secret and fuck? And he behaves as if he's still, like, maintaining his vows? I don't feel like he could live with that. Does he leave the priesthood entirely? I don't feel like she isn't even ready to talk to him about her life in any genuine way. Him leaving the priesthood in order to be with her isn't the kind of thing she's after here. I think she genuinely likes him. Don't get me wrong. But she's not ready for that kind of commitment. And even though temporarily it might seem great because she does definitely want to bone down, she would like ultimately be responsible for it in a way that I don't think she could fucking handle at all. So it's the kind of thing that, like, yeah, the idea of it is super hot. But if you look at it any further than that, it's riddled with problems. And there's also the sense of, like, I know that she wants him to, like, turn his back on this, because part of it is enjoying the fact that somebody wants you enough to turn their back on something that does mean something to them. Which she mentions in her confessional, that she has slept with some people who are married. And I have not ever slept with anybody who is married, but I have definitely had, like, the temptation in front of me, the sort of feeling of, like, I wonder if I could. And I never actually pursued it, because honestly, for me, what it was, any guy that would cheat wasn't somebody that I wanted to be sleeping with. It was the kind of thing that I was like, yeah, I'm immediately going to like lose all respect for you though. So I don't want to get you to do that, because then I'm not going to even want you, you know? And I kind of wonder if that wouldn't be the case for her as well. I feel like part of what she admires about him and attracts her to him is the fact that he is as committed as he is, and that he genuinely believes what he's preaching here, you know? There are so many comments. I'm sorry, guys. Juliet says Phoebe writing herself into an erotic fan fiction. Ryan says this was just Phoebe writing her fantasy. Everybody is saying that. I don't know if you guys are serious or if this is just your assessment. Juliet says there are some aspects of the character that Andrew Scott contributed to / basically demanded. We'll tell you in later eps. Ooh. If it had been a dream, I would have punched my screen. Juliet, same. That's why I was screaming. Is this real? Because I wanted you all to be ready for me to be really angry in a second, if that was the case. Leave enough room for Jesus. Austin says, one of my middle school teachers was a former nun who left the nunnery to marry her husband who had been a priest. Ooh. Yeah, that's one of those things that I'm like, oh, I really want to know. Like, if you are willing to leave the nunnery and he was willing to leave the church, you had to both have been really sure about how you felt about one another. So what happened? Tell me, Austin's middle school teacher, what happened? Please, in detail, share with the class. Anyway, I just had to talk about it first. You guys know that. You all know. That's why you commissioned it to be live. I don't think any of you are mad at me for talking about it right out of the gate. But I have been very open on this show in that I am into guys who are more dominant, and I am really here for like any sort of I shouldn't. And this just checked every box, and it's really wild to me because he just isn't the type that I go for normally. But it doesn't matter. It just goes to show that if you've got the attitude, it doesn't matter. It just completely overwhelms everything else. Juliet, Natasha knows what we're here for. Wet emoji. It's true though. God, I just can't imagine how many role-playing moments this episode spawned in bedrooms across multiple countries after they watched this episode. You know, this is one of those things. I have a friend who's very into role-playing, both like as a hobby and in the bedroom. And she is on this Discord server where she writes like sexy fanfic, and she plays the guy and her husband plays the woman. And they write these like elaborate stories to one another as if they are these other characters. But then it sometimes inspires actual role playing that they do in person. And it's the kind of thing that I'm like, man, if I had the time, that actually sounds like it would be really fun. You know, just writing some wild shit, and then all of a sudden you're like, ooh, I like this one. You know what? And then just look like going and getting them and just jumping on them. So, okay, let's back up. Let's back up to the beginning of the episode here. This is so, you guys. So it starts off with the two of them just hanging out. He is trying on a variety of frocks. I didn't know that there were so different many to choose from. The one he comes out in is like a cream, and it's got roses embroidered all over it. She says, I prefer the last one, but we never actually see what the last one was. And he goes back into the dressing room, and she turns and looks really shyly towards the camera. And then later on, when they're on the street, he says something that once it's really nipped in here, and he flexes his bicep. You guys, this is just rude. Okay, priest, you know that she wants to fuck you. What are you doing? You're doing it on purpose, you fucking tease. You know you are. Stop lying to her. Come on. For me, that's like a particular kryptonite of mine. I don't give a shit about abs. I don't even really care about butts. Arms, though, if you've got nice arms, it's just really, like, difficult for me. It's really, like, I feel like big arms can pretty much balance out a body that is otherwise not even in that great of shape, so that it's you still look great. Even if you've got a belly, it doesn't matter. You know, I can deal with a belly. I don't care. That's fine. It's never been something that bothers me. Nice arms are just one of those, like, I have this, like, primal sort of reaction where I'm like, oh, you must be an agile hunter. It's just like something deep in the core of, like, my lizard brain that reacts to it. So he does this, and I was just like, that's just not a nice thing to do, Father. Like, really harsh. And she says something about his arms multiple times. Then she starts looking at his neck. Also a thing for me. So I was very pleased that obviously she's got the same, like, things that she's into on men that I do. A lot of people mocked me when I was covering Doctor Who with Jamie because I wouldn't stop talking about Eccleston's neck. The man has a neck on him, though. Like, he does. I mean, honestly, it's better than the priest's neck, but the priest still has an amazing neck. I think my wristband is counting all of this as activity because I'm gesticulating so wildly that it thinks that I'm walking. So he notices, again, this happened last episode. She says his lovely neck, and he notices. I just love this conceit so much. Obviously, what we're getting at here is that he sees her more clearly than anyone else. She's doing this all the time with everybody that she interacts with. She's making little comments and mentally cataloging moments and just generally sort of stepping away and distancing herself from whatever she's in. And nobody else has really clocked it, or if they have, they haven't cared enough to say anything. And he keeps on being like, what is that? What did you just do? And I just really love that this keeps coming up and how much it throws her. Because a thing with relationships and people wanting to be in relationships, there's certainly, just aspects of people don't want to be lonely. People want to feel like there's somebody out there looking out for them. There's certainly just practical aspects. But I think for a lot of us, we want to be seen. We want somebody who understands us and, like, really gets us in a way that we've sort of given up on ever happening. And yet, as much as we can want that, when you meet someone who does see you, the thing that you don't count on is that they're going to see things you didn't want them to see. When you think, I would just like to be seen, what we're thinking when we say that is usually, I want somebody to understand how whimsical I am. I'm so adorable. I can be so random. And I want them to be able to, like, understand how random I am and the weird references I make. But then when it's like, oh no, I see your childhood trauma coming out in your behavior in our conversation right now. All of a sudden you're like, hey, what? Pump the brakes. This is not what I fucking signed up for. It is, though. Oh, it is. Oh, it sucks. I'm here to tell you, it's great, but it sucks. It's part of what drew me so much to Owen. There were a couple moments in our relationship where he just read me so completely. I was doing some shit, and he was like, I don't know, I feel like you're being kind of manipulative because you're saying XYZ, but I know that XYZ is blah, blah, blah. So I just feel like you're kind of trying to get me to feel this way, even though that's not really fair to me. And I had to stop and be like, oh no. I thought that I had it figured out how to, like, fool you. And I'm really pleased that I'm not fooling you. But also, I hate it, and let me fool you. And that's a really difficult thing to get past. I'm still working on it, to be honest. You know, it's just being actually vulnerable with somebody to the point that you almost feel like it could be used against you. You just have to trust that they're not going to do that. There's few people that any of us feel that kind of trust in, you know? So, yeah, I love this so much. I really do. So he's asking her at this point whether or not she has, first they talk about like life after death, and he asks if she's been to a funeral, and she, you know, remembers her mother's funeral. And that's a major factor in this episode, is her mother's funeral with her sister. And first of all, she looks amazing, and she's very self-conscious, because I love this detail. This is so true. The days that you like looking good isn't even a priority and doesn't matter, you guys all know, you know, like, especially with the fucking pandemic. I bet a lot of us had amazing hair days that the world never got to see. You could take selfies, but it never really quite captures it, does it? Every time I've taken a selfie, because I'm like, my hair looks amazing today, in the selfie, it's just so pitiful. It's nothing. So she's struggling with the fact that everybody's like, God, you look amazing, when she's supposed to be fucking grieving. And then there's this moment where her soon-to-be godmother, stepmother, is talking to her dad, and she says she's shameless. And her sister says, can you not think the absolute worst of someone for a change? Which really hit me really fucking hard. And what's awful about the scene is that we know she's right. And so eventually her sister has to eat her words. But in the moment when her sister just says that and is so irritated with her, I just really felt personally attacked, because I do often think the worst of people, personally. It's just like a trait that I'm not proud of. I've talked before about how I think I may have obsessive compulsive personality disorder, and I think it's tied in with that. There's a bit of a like weird combo superiority inferiority complex that goes on there. And I definitely see both their points in this scene. So they greet everybody. Everyone's telling her how amazing her mother was. There's this whole, you know, the gathering afterward. And then she goes upstairs to talk to her dad. And it's the most I've ever liked him, because her dad is just, he is so overshadowed by the godmother in every scene he's in, because he just can't fucking string a sentence together before she decides to chime in and finish the sentence for him most of the time. And they're talking, and he confesses that he found her mom difficult and she was very fun, but that he didn't actually like that about her, which I found really interesting. I'm super curious what Phoebe's drawing from for this scene. Is this a real situation, a conversation that she had? Because it's such a distinct reaction, and it feels rooted in something real. And at one point they get interrupted by the godmother, who's beaming from ear to ear, despite the fact that her fucking alleged best friend's funeral is happening 10 feet below her feet. And he comments on how annoying she is, which evidently doesn't matter to him much going forward. I'm curious about that. I wonder if he was experiencing the same thing she is, because she's talking about how she just wants somebody to tell her what to do. Maybe he felt that way too. And he got into a relationship with somebody who would control his life because that's exactly what he wanted. You know? I don't know. Who fucking knows? So they have a bit of a heart-to-heart, and she starts crying and says that she doesn't know what she's going to do. I forgot to mention that her ex-boyfriend shows up for the funeral, and she's comforting him in this way that I just love this whole thing with his character. I hate it. I hate watching it, but it's really well done. And eventually her dad's just like, we just have to buck up and you turn on the charm and we'll go downstairs and we just have to get through it. And like I said, it's just one of those moments that I really appreciated because I feel like it underscores how distant she feels from her father now. Getting to see this moment between the two of them where they were actually vulnerable with one another for a second. It makes it like sadder to know how rarely they connect anymore. And her godmother is like a major part of that. I don't want to blame everything on one person, because it just does sort of, there's a feeling to it of like, I'm trying to absolve Fleabag and her father of responsibility as adults to make connections. But there is something to be said for the obstacles that, any adults face. And it feels like she guards the godmother, like she guards the father jealously. Like she really doesn't want him to have a relationship with his daughters because she wants all of who he is to be in relation to her. And it's just, it's so much more than just selfishness. There's a cruelty to that, and I can't imagine being that kind of person who like is threatened by someone's daughters, what is wrong with you? So anyway, I'm getting off track here, but yeah, she has this moment with him and I appreciated this. And then we see her talking later to Boo. And this is really sweet. She is saying that she doesn't know where to put all of the love that she has for her mother now that her mother's gone. And she just doesn't know what to do with it because it's still there. It's not just going to go away. And Boo says, I'll take it. And she sort of laughs and Boo's like, no, seriously, give it to me. It has to go somewhere. I'll take it. And it's just, again, absolutely heart-wrenching to know what happens with Boo and realize like how the guilt was already so substantial, but the more we learn about her relationship with Boo, the more devastating it is to know how everything wound up happening. And it's truly, it's a little bit mean-spirited of the show, just a tiny bit, like, yikes, I would love to know, and I'm sure there's been interviews done and stuff, where Phoebe drew her inspiration for the story overall from. Because this is something that, like, it could be as simple as I just thought it up because I was like, wouldn't that be fucked up? Or she could have, like, read a news story where it, all of this wound up, like, coming out in the investigation, and she was like, wow, imagine having to live with that. And she decided to sort of explore it. But yeah, I'm very curious about that. And so yeah, this moment where she's thinking about Boo, it cuts from her agreeing to give Boo all the love, and she is then kneeling in church. And she's got a very determined expression on her face here. It's like she's going to pray to prove something, or just out of like a desperation. She just, clearly this is weighing on her. And I wondered if this was going to come out in the scene where he's taking her confession. I was sort of like, is she going to tell him the truth about Boo? And I really don't know what kind of reaction I would want from him, because on the one hand, I am very invested in the two of them, right? So I don't want anything she says to ruin the attraction that's growing between the two of them. But I also don't want him to behave as if what happened isn't horrifying. I want him to like give it the gravity it deserves, but at the same time, offer forgiveness in a way that feels genuine. And I don't know if it would really matter to her getting forgiveness from him. She doesn't know what she's looking for, right? In that respect. But if she had confessed that here, first of all, things certainly wouldn't have gone in the direction they do. I'm very confident. But also, I mean, guys, tell me how you would feel if you had started dating somebody and it was a very informal thing. You weren't even honestly telling yourselves that you were dating, even though it's very clearly what you're doing. And they confess this to you. My best friend in the world killed themselves because their significant other cheated, and they had cheated with me, and I never told them. You can't lie. That would change the way you see that person. It just would. And whether that's necessarily fair isn't even the issue. It's like an unavoidable side effect. And maybe the only thing that can sort of even that out is him telling her something similarly horrifying, that he has been weighing him down. Because there is a balance of power in relationships. And this is a really fucked up kind of comparison to make, but I'm going to make it. Those of you who have watched Community, do y'all remember the episode where Britta accidentally drunk dials Jeff? And he gets this, he doesn't pick up because he was asleep. But in the morning, he has this ridiculous fucking voicemail that she left while she was drunk. And he just thinks it's funny. But as he goes to school and runs into her, it's super clear that she is mortified that she left this message. And she feels like there's just no way to look him in the eye. And eventually, after talking with a friend of his, they come to the conclusion, you have to even out the scales. Because now there's a power imbalance and you have this embarrassing thing. You have to get equally drunk and call and leave her an embarrassing message. And as soon as that's done and it feels genuine, she will be comfortable around you again. But as for right now, she just can't even handle being around him, you know? That's what I feel like has to happen. If she confesses something that intense and personal and something that she will never be able to shake her for her whole life. Eventually, she may have some peace. She may be able to forgive herself, but it will never be gone. He has to do the same thing. And it's very clear in the scene where he goes to her coffee shop with her. He's hiding something too. He is trying to get her to open up because he can sense that she has difficulty with that. But it's very clear that something drove him to the priesthood, and she asks him whether he is close with his parents, and he says no, and is very quick to turn the conversation back on her. It could be that he's simply doing that because he recognizes that she's trying to shift shit herself, and he's just, batting it back into her side of the court. I don't think so, though. I think that there's something going on with him, and it's very easy to sort of be in the position that he is and thus always be focused on other people so that he doesn't have to think about whatever's in his own past. And that's the only thing that I can think of that would make it okay. Because otherwise, if he is somebody who has lived a life free of that depth of guilt, the kind that your literal best friend in the world is dead now due to this action. And it's not a direct thing, but come on. You're never going to feel like they really do understand you because you have to experience something like that firsthand, that sort of feeling. Wouldn't you think? I don't have anything like that in my own past. I have things that I feel super guilty for, but I have always been able to sort of on the one hand, and on the other hand, and sort of rationalize them to myself enough. Or at the very least, I can step back and be like, well, everything eventually worked out. You know, like, yeah, I wound up talking to Owen before I was actually split up from Brendan, but we had agreed to divorce before that happened. And I was still technically living with him, but we had agreed already, and I was planning to move out. It was already on its way. And yeah, I did leave, but he wound up getting remarried within the year. Like, it was no big deal. So I can step back and be like, it wound up being fine, it's fine. There's nothing to be done with something like this. They're gone, and that's it. It's just, there's a death. There's nothing more final than that. So, let's see. Juliet says, a few sources of inspiration for Phoebe. Describes herself as being a very angry woman during her 20s who valued her worth based on sex. Boo is based on her real-life best friend, Vicky Jones, who is Phoebe's artistic partner. Thankfully, she's alive. That's good. And there are some moments based on real life. Phoebe said she had a friend who miscarried while at a restaurant. The friend just continued on and didn't bring it up or cause a fuss. Phoebe said she wanted to convey how often women suffer in silence. Yeah, that's another. I forgot that she confesses that. She lied about the miscarriage to him. Which I wonder if that had any effect on him, actually, now that I stop and think about it, because I could see him feeling that she was a bit too, like, in too delicate a state, that he would feel as if he was taking advantage of her if he were to initiate anything. But then to find out that she wasn't actually pregnant, she didn't actually have a miscarriage, there isn't any sort of baggage like that in her life. There's certainly other types, but not that. I wonder if that sort of made him feel a little bit more freed up to behave. And once he sort of recontextualizes everything that happened in that scene. Because it's a combination of, she doesn't have that baggage after all, and she was willing to put herself through the humiliation of pretending to defend her sister and hide for her sake, which is a very attractive quality. If you are, like, into people who have a strong moral compass, then that sort of thing is just going to make you go, wow, you really subjected yourself to something pretty embarrassing for the sake of somebody that you love, and I can't help but admire that. So I could see that having nudged things along for him maybe a little bit. I don't know. Yeah, Juliet says he pauses for a long time when she confesses that. I kind of wonder if that's what it is. I don't know. I'm really interested to see if she ever does fully open up to him, because, like, that's what I want, of course. But it all depends on how that happens and how he's willing to meet her. Because the conversation in the cafe goes left pretty quick. He keeps asking her questions. And she defends, as she does, like it's an actual fight. Until he says, I'm just trying to get to know you. And she just straight up flat out says, and I don't want that. Which I found interesting. She just really says it. And I'm not sure if she realizes that she doesn't want that, or if that was a surprise that she blurted out and then realized it was true and was like, oh. But then he says, I'm just trying to help you. And that was a mistake. Because it's not, I'm just trying to get to know you because I like you and I would like to know more about you and understand you. It comes across as a lot more patronizing and a lot more like saving her, which is pretty much where she goes with it right away. She's like, oh, well, thank you, Father. And he's like, no. And she can't even tell him Boo is dead. I mean, that's how like tied up she is. She can't even say it. And she pretty much kicks him out. And he realizes as he's leaving exactly why. Like, he knows he fucked up. He knows as soon as he says it that he fucked up. But there's just no taking it back at that point. And I really get her feeling like this. There's a moment in that movie Bridesmaids that I feel like is in the same energy, where she had a bakery, and that's like the opening of the movie. It's already closed. She tried to open this like bakery, and the business failed, and she's feeling like a failure. And at sort of this weird crossroads in her life where she doesn't know what to do. And she starts dating this guy, and she mentions that the bakery failed. And when she wakes up, he's got all of these ingredients out on the counter and says, like, I thought maybe we could bake something together. And she gets really resentful and says, don't try to fix me. And I understand this dude, what he was, like, attempting. But if I were her, I'd probably feel the same way. Like, it's just kind of gross, man. Like, don't. It's tough because when you care about a person and you're trying to reach out to them, it can come across this way. And it can be so hard to know how far to push it, what exactly, how to phrase something, you know. So, yeah, this is a really good episode, you guys. And I'm so mad because he just walks away from her with this look on his face at the end. Like, he can't believe that he almost just fucked her literally in the church. And I get it, but also, I really would like you to do it. But also don't. But also definitely do. This is one of those things where I wish that we could have, like, those scenarios, like, where you have a save in a video game and you get to, like, experience it as if, and then if it all falls apart, you can just, like, go back to the spot you saved at and start over again. You know, wouldn't that be nice? Just be like, oh yeah, this choice did not work out. Okay, take backsies. Don't want to do this. Never mind. But life isn't like that. It just keeps happening to you. So, I'm going to wrap up. I'm over time. But thank you again very much to Karyn for commissioning this as a live watch. It was really fun. I'm so agitated, you guys. I really am. I cannot wait to record on the next episode. When's the next recording? June 4th. Okay, so not too long. And then after that is June 8th. And it looks like those are the only... Isn't there 8 per season? I'm booked until almost September. So I don't know if they have been commissioned and they're just not on here. But if they haven't been commissioned, y'all are going to want to get on that because it's going to be a minute otherwise. All right, I'm going to wrap up. But thank you again, Karyn. Appreciate you all. Oh, there's just 2 more. Gabriella says, I forgot because Karyn said that earlier this episode. There's only 2 more. Oh, that's so, I'm so sad. I'm so sad. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.